Hello, my friends, and welcome to coverage of Grand Prix Toronto, coming your way live from Canada. My name's Riley Knight. Of course, I'm joined by Eduardo Sajgalik, flying the flag of the home country here proudly, as we see Jonathan Zhang on Griselbrand and Ben Ragan on Affinity. And check this out. How about the zero-lander Simeon Spirit Guide into Faithless Looting? He got there with a swamp.
Right. So when I'm facing Griselbrand and they go turn one, Simeon Spirit Guide, Faithless Looting, but kept, I am scared because I know that they kept because they have their fastest possible opener of Goryo's Vengeance into Griselbrand. I know that's basically the only reason they kept any reasonable 7. So yeah, if I'm the Affinity player, this is just a disaster for on Ben's side because, well, basically, Jonathan has all the pieces with one exception. The second land.
Yeah, and this is really terrifying stuff here for Ragan, who has already had not only a Borborygmus Enraged, but also a Griselbrand put into the bin here by Zhang, and a pretty slow start from the Affinity player as well. Just a Signal Pest, Mox Opal, and a Cranial Play. Oh, sorry, a Springleaf Drum. But look at this. Griselbrand on turn 2. We are going to start to spin that wheel. 7 cards off the top, and we are going to see this combo take place as early here, as you mentioned, as turn 2.
Yeah, and the win percentage for Jonathan from this spot is extraordinarily high. Basically, the Affinity deck can't really do much to interact outside of maybe a Galvanic Blast through that Springleaf Drum plus Signal Pest. And Jonathan can probably play around that at his leisure with a Nourishing Shoal. He can because of the attack, he can draw 21 cards. So the fail rate on this is extraordinarily low. And Jonathan's basically looking here at a combination of Simeon Spirit Guides, Desperate Ritual, Nourishing Shoal, Splicing Desperate Ritual to add mana, and eventually get Faithless Looting to get back Faithless Looting or Manamorphose, Goryo's Vengeance, Borborygmus, win.
So an attack with the Griselbrand is going to draw Zhang even more cards. Of course, Griselbrand does have lifelink. Looks like he's playing a bit of Pai Gao here, Eduardo, with the way that he's arranging those cards. I imagine those piles there are the cards that are relevant. And of course, Ragan, after taking this hit, we're going to see Zhang draw another 7 cards. He's looking for Nourishing Shoal in addition to Worldspine Worm, which is going to gain him 11 life. Let's see if he can find... I mean, there is a percentage chance that he just completely hits the big Whiffsky here.
Yeah, but that Nourishing Shoal was perfect. He already had the Worldspine Worm, so there we go. We're just checking how many cards are in the deck. Just...
Doesn't want to overdraw here, as he's already drawn 21 cards on turn 2. Let's not forget that. So Zhang now going through the motions, a combo finish on turn number 2. Is this the brave new future of Modern, Eduardo?
People were terrified when this deck came out the first time, and then people realized that some pretty good interaction exists and is more than sufficient since you can attack their hand, the stack, the graveyard. So it's a deck you can interact with, but the Affinity deck... Pre-board, definitely not suited for this. And here, Jonathan should pretty easily and convincingly take this one down. Nourishing Shoal, Worldspine Worm. If he can't, splice a Desperate Ritual onto it, and just through the breach, Borborygmus or Goryo's Vengeance. Bob's your uncle, essentially, here. We're just waiting for Jonathan to go through the motions. Probably he's just worried about playing around a... Galvanic Blast, since this is the only relevant interaction piece pre-board that Ben can give from his Affinity.
So 2 Simeon Spirit Guides exiled means that we now have 2 red mana floating, and this is the beginning of the end here. Nourishing Shoal with a Desperate Ritual sliced onto it, just as you mentioned. Nourishing Shoal happens to be an instant, so we're going to get a lot of value out of that Nourishing Shoal. Zhang gains 11 life, gains some red mana there in the process as well, and 7 more cards off the top of the library. Simple as that. Card count so far, 29 this turn. He's drawn 28 off Griselbrand, and 1 for the draw step, of course.
Sure, the free one.
The free one. Everyone gets that one, but if you want to get extras, you're going to have to work a little harder for it. Another Nourishing Shoal here for Zhang, in addition to another Worldspine Worm.
Yeah, and this pretty much spells game over. Once he goes to 21, he can draw another 14 cards, and yeah, we're done.
So another splicing of Desperate Ritual onto the Nourishing Shoal is going to gain net another mana here for Zhang. Pretty complicated and weird kind of interaction when you're getting your head around it for the first time, but the more you see it, the more sense it makes. Going to go up now to 36 cards drawn for the turn.
Makes total sense. There's a ritual. There's some fish flying about.
I mean, from a flavor perspective, certainly, Eduardo, it's one of the most flavorful decks in the multiverse. No one's denying that. But look at this, Zhang with a grip as full as anything here.
Yeah, and at this point, he's just finding the cards to finish this game out.
So another Nourishing Shoal here. Ben Ragan, he can just, F6 and start thinking about his dinner there, because there's not much else for him to do in this situation. Once again, Zhang really only having to worry about Galvanic Blast, but even that's not really an issue here now that he's at a nice, safe 25 through the breach. He's going to put Borborygmus in play, and now Zhang is just going to piff his deck at Ragan. 3, 6, 9, 12. All of this damage going straight at the face, and Ragan has seen enough. Ladies and gentlemen, a turn 2 combo kill. Eduardo, what do you make of this?
That's nothing. I've done it turn 1 before.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. I just, once again, have to get out that umbrella because you are raining on this parade here, my friend. Players are going to have access to deck lists between games here, and luckily enough, we have access to deck lists as well. Let's have a look at what Jonathan Zhang here, the victor in game number 1. What's he working with here post-board?
So post-board, he's essentially... I'm not sure about Chalice of the Void here. It does shut down a lot of Ben's interaction, since Chalice on 1 shuts down Spell, Pierce, Thoughtseize. Probably won't shut down Grafdigger's Cage. But I don't think that's necessarily the plan you want. On the play, the Chalice being able to shut down 0 mana spells makes it a much better option. But on the draw, it's a lot weaker. So I would probably see Jonathan not board those in for game 2, but a potential game 3. I like the 2 Shattering Spree, the Engineered Explosives, and 1 or 2 of the Pact of Negations, depending what gets sideboarded out. I think here, Jonathan wants to remain relatively tight with his main deck. He can shave a Worldspine Worm. That Collective Brutality, not necessarily at its best here. The Cathartic Reunion's pretty dangerous in the face of Spell Pierce. So shave some of these cards, get that Engineered Explosives in to deal with Rest in Peace or Grafdigger's Cage. Shattering Spree to deal with everything, essentially, apart from Rest in Peace. And maybe a Pact in case of a Spell Pierce or a timely Galvanic Blast.
Well, Ben Ragan's going to have to find his way back into this match after having exactly 1 turn, Eduardo. 1 single turn of game 1 to do anything at all after Zhang essentially drew the perfect 7 off the top. Well, not quite. It had to exile the Simian Spirit Guide to cast that Faithless Looting. So really, actually kind of rubbish. But all the same, the turn 2 kill can't be denied. How is Ragan going to contest that in game number 2?
So he's going to have actual interaction. Grafdigger's Cage preventing the quickest kills with Gorgeous Vengeance, a copy. Rest in Peace doing the same, a little more permanent. No more value from Faithless Looting is also important. And the 2 copies of Spell Pierce, actually pretty key. The Gristle Shoalbrand, while it has multiple avenues, well, it has through the breach costs 5. It's pretty hard to play that through a Spell Pierce. And that was why, again, the Pact of Negation might have been important from Jonathan's side. The 2 Thoughtseize is also not enough normally, but if Ben does it with a Mox Soul Pull and a Cranial Planing and Galvanic Blast and deals the pressure, that'd be great. The important thing to remember here is that Gristlebrand still costs 7 life to draw those cards. If Ben can get Jonathan's life total low enough, then he can make Jonathan go off at a much lower life total, much less life, means much less cards, a much lower percentage chance to get there.
So an aggressive start here for Ben Ragan is a great way to pressure the combo finish for Zhang, who, again, had a fresh 20 life to work with when we saw him begin game number 1 there. So that's one way for Ragan to disrupt. It's not often the way that you disrupt combo decks. Getting them, well, I guess getting them dead to 20 is one way to disrupt their game plan, but just chipping away at their life total here for Zhang is actually, going to be a great way for Ragan to prevent him from just seeing as many cards. That's a great point to make, in addition to, of course, things like Galvanic Blast to burn him out from range.
Right, exactly. If Jonathan decides to go off at, say, 11 or less life, draw 7, you can Galvanic Blast in response.
Just get him. Just get him.
It's a disruption piece.
Yeah. Very.
The age-old questions. How does a burn player get card advantage?
By having them dead with the when they've got a full grip?
Yeah, 7 cards.
Easy.
How many cards do you have in hand? 7. Well, you're dead. So
You're
they're all gone.
7 cards ahead. There you go. So now both players, of course, having access to opposing deck lists. This is a standard feature of top 8 matches here because, of course, these lists are posted online. They're posted all over the place, and to make sure the players have an even playing field here, they are going to get to have a look at their opponent's deck lists between each game and before each match as well, to make sure, again, we have that nice, even, steady footing for all players concerned. After having sideboarded and shuffled up, looks like Zhang's got some sneaky little sideboard plans under the table there as well, which again is perfectly above board. Players allowed to consult notes between games, not during games, but between games. So that is all good as we see players now putting away those deck lists and getting ready for game number 2. In our pre-match analysis, Eduardo, you mentioned that you think Griselbrand is ahead here, does have the edge. Has your assessment changed based on what we've seen so far?
The turn 2 kill did not change my assessment.
Did it?
No.
How surprising.
It's shocking. It is true that Griselbrand will be much weaker in post-board games on average because people are going to be boarding in interaction. The question is how much, and the affinity deck is not boarding in enough to sway the matchup to a point where I believe they would be favored from a game down. So I believe still that we're going to see the 7/7 Demon go through to the semis. That's my analysis.
All right, there we go. Shooting from the hip here. My colleague Eduardo Sajgalik is all over it, and that's the analysis from the booth here. We will see how things plan out. I mean, anything can happen. Anything can happen. We've seen mulligans to 4 this weekend. We've seen some incredible top decks. We've seen players forget how the game of Magic works and just punt the ball way down the field. Maybe thinking about that ham sandwich they had for lunch rather than the game that's in front of them. But all the same, it's been quite a spectacle of Magic throughout this weekend. And it's been our pleasure to bring it to you as well. For those of you who have stuck with us so far throughout the weekend, thank you very much for choosing to spend Saturday and Sunday with us here in Toronto. For those of you who are just joining us, welcome. By all means, welcome. It's great to have you along here for the top 8 of GP Toronto. The format, of course, is modern, the Wild West of Magic, and it's great to have this format under the spotlight on both sides of the Atlantic. GP Leon coming your way in 1 week's time. Jonathan Zhang going down to 7. Ragan looks happy with his 6, or with his 7, unfortunately, for Zhang. Going down to 6, is that a big knock on this combo deck?
The deck has, let's put it mildly, consistency issues. So it does mulligan often, but it tends to mulligan well. Goryo's Vengeance plus Griselbrand with Faithless Looting, don't need that many cards, and that's all you need to get there. On the flip side, you can get some really horrible hands. You can have, for example, here's a totally legit hand that this deck can produce. Freeland, Simian Spirit Guide, Borborygmos Enraged, Worldspine Worm, Lightning Axe.
Yeah.
Does that incite you?
Yeah, it's not an exciting hand to look at. So 6 cards here for Zhang. Counts them out very quickly, and let's see what he can find here. Oh dear.
So it looks like Mountain, Faithless Looting, Griselbrand, and some Simian Spirit Guides.
Okay.
So we're definitely on the keep here.
On the keep ski here. Some scry going below decks now for Jonathan Zhang and Ragan. Let's see if he can conjure up a faster start than last time. Well, only 3 permanents in play on turn number 1.
Yeah. And here, Jonathan's going to know if Ben has a Spell Pierce right here, right now, because this would be the spell to Spell Pierce. Jonathan going for 2 extra cards plus enabling his plan is really dangerous.
Oh, yeah, because discarding is a bonus, right? Especially when you're discarding 2 Griselbrands. Wait, what's he doing? That's the best card in his deck. Why is he discarding it?
Well, I mean, in the graveyard it costs 2.
Oh, right. Yeah, Goryo's Vengeance. That's the reason. Yeah, Goryo's Vengeance, a card that is very, very narrow, but geez, it does a lot of work here. But check this out. Rest in peace here. That's going to be huge here for Ragan, and it means that Zhang... I mean, what's the way forward for him now?
Through the Breach. Essentially, through the Breach, getting a big monster. And that's why sometimes you don't want to, when you're playing that combo deck, discard always your copies of Griselbrand. Having 1 in hand is actually okay for situations like this. However, Jonathan probably took the risk, understanding that he mulliganed to 6. He doesn't want to be with a dead card in hand, and and he knows that Ben only has 1 copy of Rest in Peace, so he took the risk here, feeling that even if he through the Breach is a worm, deals 15, gets free 5/5s. That's good enough.
Oh, yeah. And you got to go for it, right? I mean, Ragan's had a decent start, follow-up play here with the cranial plating coming down on that old Memnite. Things going pretty well for Ragan.
Yeah, I would say this is how Ben sees the matchup going in his favor. Pressure, disruption. That's what he needs.
And he's got both of those things with that Faithless Looting proving a bit of a liability now that Rest in Peace has entered play. That's the disruption. And the pressure is Cranial Plating. Doesn't get much better than that. But Shattering Spree here, 1 and 2.
Yeah, totally killing the pressure, killing the colored mana source as well. Now, Ben doesn't have access to any of his colored mana spells. No Spell Pierce, no Thoughtseize.
And that Shattering Spree should, of course, be exiled as well. It's on a separate part of that exile zone, but it is indeed in the exile zone.
Yeah. Thankfully, I think this is just inattention. There's no synergy with the Shattering Spree in the graveyard. That'll probably get fixed at some point. It's okay.
Yeah, there we go. Look at that.
Yeah. Here, Jonathan, with the Engineered Explosives, able to kill that Rest in Peace down the line. One important detail on why Rest in Peace is so good against these graveyard combo decks. Well, that Rest in Peace already removed these creatures. They're not in the graveyard. It's not like Gravedigger's Cage, which leaves things in their place. So with Gravedigger's Cage, if you destroy it later, you can combo off later because your pieces are still there. But with Engineered Explosives, with Rest in Peace, that's not quite possible. That's why I kind of nickname it Rest in Pieces. It's a little more
accurate. Rest in Pieces. Rest in pepperonis, mate. 6 feet under that pepperoni pile. And those Gristlebrand's aren't coming back. No way, no how.
Right. And you can see Ben's hand. Okay, there's an Argban Ravager that I would highly recommend casting this turn, but Galvanic Blast and Master of Ethereum, not castable without that Springleaf Drum. And that's one of the risks that Affinity runs with playing with these colored spells. And that's why they don't run that many in the main deck. Because they're so risky. If you don't have a Spire of Industry, a Glimmer Void, a Mox Opal, it can happen. Here, that Shattering Spree destroyed the board totally. So yeah, here though, the attack for 2, putting Jonathan down to 10. This Ravager, let's see. The Ravager is going to be free damage with the Darksteel Citadels. So that would be free. If he wanted to put the counters on a Nexus, that would be an extra... So free. So 10, down to 10 this turn. Next turn, we're going to have a... We could have had a 4/4 Nexus and a Memnite. We're going to have a 4/4 Memnite most likely. One thing here that's really tough is that Argbound Ravager runs into Engineered Explosives. So I think this is the right turn to put the counters. Put the counters on the Nexus is the correct play in my view. Ben deciding to kind of go half and half, just sacrificing the Citadel, which I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of, but I understand the line. Essentially, you get to activate the Nexus for an extra artifact later down the line, or an extra land would allow you to pop that attacking free Blink Moth.
So Ben Ragan now, after having juiced up the Blink Moth Nexus, I should say. Looks like he's going to continue to slam and jam with these creatures. All the 1/1s getting in now. One of them a little larger than the other, of course. And Zhang down to 8, looking at a hand that doesn't seem to do too much against his Affinity opponent. Even with that Engineered Explosives, Ragan's played around it very well indeed, putting a lot of pressure on. And I think Zhang is very close to 0% to win this match here. Although Rest in Peace does eat it to the Engineered Explosives.
Actually, Jonathan has a line that enables him to potentially win here because he has Lightning Axe. Lightning Axe, get rid of the Rest in Peace. Lightning Axe the free land. Discarding Gristlebrand and hope to get Goryo's Vengeance and get lucky.
All right, here we go. Big rips. Jonathan Zhang is up all night to have fun. And let's see if he can find the way to get lucky here off the top of his library.
Yeah, so this is getting pretty close now. I believe this attack puts Jonathan down to 6. So Jonathan's going to be forced to attack with the Gristlebrand first.
Whoa. Okay, we have to back up a long way here because apparently the Arcbound Ravager doesn't put the counters on the Inkmoth Nexus, of course, because of Rest in Peace. This is actually a pretty important thing that was missed. It seems by both players there, no counters should have been put on that Blinkmoth Nexus because the Ravager never died. It was exiled, a replacement effect, rather than going to the graveyard. And so as a result there, Blinkmoth Nexus doesn't get pumped up in the way that we thought it did. I mean, this is what Modern is all about. There are so many tiny little things that you have to keep track of like that.
Yeah, and I'll apologize to the viewers for not spotting that one. It's actually an interaction that I am familiar with, have seen. It's just that these games are so... these games are complex. You think on multiple different angles, and sometimes you miss something like this. Because Rest in Peace stopping Ravager is not something you necessarily think of.
No.
If your plan is to be aggressive, it's extremely important when you deck build. You need to understand that Rest in Peace stops Arcbound Ravager from functioning. So that's why you wouldn't want to play too many copies unless you faced endless graveyard decks. But this would change a lot. Apart from the land that got sacrificed here, that means that Jonathan should have taken 2 less damage. He probably would have still Lightning Axe, so this would put Jonathan to 8 rather than 6. And that extra 1 point of life is critical because that's an extra 7 cards if he top decks Scorio's Vengeance.
So that could be truly decisive here, and it looks like the players are having this issue sorted out by a judge here. And look, no one's going to fault you, or no reasonable person is going to fault you, Eduardo, for missing something as small as that. We know you play Rest in Peace in a deck with Snapcaster Mage. You realize, okay, my Snapcasters now become worse. They're just Ambush Vipers without Death Touch. That's fine, right? But this again isn't at the forefront of your mind. It is. I think it's a great analysis that you've provided. It is a deck building concern. It's an actual thing that you need to know before you sit down for a game of Magic, how every single card in your 75 interacts with each other. It's something that everyone needs to understand. And here, it's quite clear to see that it's just something that people are going to miss. And no, as I said, no reasonable person is going to fault you for having missed that, my dude. Manamorphose here from Jonathan Zhang as play continues. Not exactly sure what the resolution of that judge call was. I'm sure we'll be able to find out before too much longer. It actually can't be rewound. We're finding out now that the game has continued too far for it to be rewound, and Ben Ragan is going to pick up a game rule violation warning and a failure to maintain game state warning for Jonathan as well. So both players paying the price there. And Ben Ragan, unfortunately, is going to have to pay a lot more careful attention to interactions like that in the future.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting, by the way, while this has kind of been resolving and we were discussing, is I believe I don't know if Jonathan has Nourishing Shoal plus Worm, but that should have been fired off before Ben had a chance to untap, since that would have put him at risk of both Galvanic Blast and Spell Pierce the previous turn. So I think that if I'm not mistaken, yes, that is Nourishing Shoal plus Worldspine Worm. I think that Jonathan there should have used the Nourishing Shoal in order to gain life in case Ben had drawn a colored source of mana. I think it's a little too ambitious to try to Through the Breach or Worm, since Ben's at 20. 2 attacks is probably not going to get the job done in time. So I think that Jonathan there should have fired that off during his own turn, gotten back up to 17, then back down to 15, before any shenanigans could have happened with a Spell Pierced or a Galvanic Blast that Ben may have in hand. There's no need to take the risk here, I felt.
Nourishing Shoal exiling that Worldspine Worm is the line you mentioned there, and he has in fact gone back up to 13, so a little bit more breathing room for Zhang here as we turn things now back to Ragan, who is looking at another Arcbound Ravager in hand, this one unimpeded by a Rest in Peace. And Rest in Peace seems to have exiled itself as well. Another little corner case interaction there.
Yeah. So one of the weird things about Magic rulings, the cards have an effect and see themselves leave play. So if a card changes how something leaves play, it sees itself and changes itself. So interestingly, with something like Abrupt Decay, it would destroy it. It would see itself go away, and when the Abrupt Decay resolves, it would go to the graveyard. An important interaction for fans of the Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, very, very important indeed. We're going to see now Arcbound Ravager getting, well, look at this, hoeing down on this breakfast buffet. Looks like the first item on the menu is a Darksteel Citadel. Munch, munch, munch. Goes the Ravager here. Oh, Ragan's still thinking about it. No? Okay. Knife and fork out. Just thinking about it here. Is he just going just crunching those numbers?
Let's see. With Jonathan at 13, if you can put Jonathan at 7 or less, that is ideal. So if Ben has any way to do that, I would believe that he would. However, the Darksteel Citadel, let's see, probably had to activate the Nexus. The Ravager was cast by the 2-Ink Moth, so I don't think he could put Jonathan to 7 or less. So I think it's okay here to not deal the additional damage. The other thing you might want to consider is gaining 11, so 11 up to 22. Here, I would have probably dealt an extra point of damage at least, because then it plays around single Nourishing Shoal drawing an extra 14 cards. It would mean that Jonathan would draw an extra 7 with with that interaction rather than 14.
So Ragan here has to think in multiples of 7, and we're going to see now Griselbrand come down thanks to that Goryo's Vengeance, and all of a sudden, Zhang is drawing cards off the top of his library. He's going to have to find a pretty special line to pull things together here. What are his percentages looking like right now?
It may look bad, but they're actually really high.
Are they really?
Yes. Essentially, depending on his sideboard strategy, that's the core consideration, is how he has sideboarded. If he's boarded too many Worldspine Worms and Borborygmos Moths and Rages out of his deck, then it's going to be a lot harder for him to combo off. And the reason I think his percentage is high is because he can attack with the Griselbrand, and that redraws cards. And from my view, Jonathan, even if he doesn't get there, he can set it up in such a way that next turn he would get there.
So, Zhang in for 7. Lifelinking Gristle Daddy gets in there and draws Zhang another 7 cards. Borborygmus is one of them. You can see it through the breach. Tucked away there as well. Has he found the Nourishing Shoal that he needs? A little bit of Pai Gao going on once again as he consults the different piles of cards that he can play. And here we are. Through the breach.
Yep. Well, you don't necessarily need to go full combo. As long as he has 5 lands, he's good to win.
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Jonathan Zhang finds his way into the semi-finals over Ben Ragan after a huge start from Ragan, putting a lot of pressure on Zhang. A rest in peace was dealt with duly by the Griselbrand player there, and he managed to pull himself over the line. An incredible performance from Zhang there. Really, he's back up against it with a turn 2 rest in peace, but Eduardo, he gets the job done.
Exactly. Finds his engineered explosives, deals with the rest in peace, finds his lightning axe, gets a Griselbrand back where it belongs in the graveyard, eventually gets to that Goryo's Vengeance because of that Nourishing Shoal buying him so much time. That Shattering Spree destroying the colored mana source, destroying the Cranial Planing, so much time. It would basically buy time, get there.
And that's how it was done there for Zhang, and we will see him now in the semi-finals of GP Toronto. That's the end of the ride, end of the line here for Ben Ragan. But we will, of course, be checking in with him at the next Pro Tour because he's qualified for that after this terrific finish here. Well done to him. Dan Ward and Alessandro Pogorzhelsky. Oh, dear. I had been practicing this one backstage. Still managed to make a meal of it. Alessandro Pogorzhelsky got there in the end. I'm so sorry to you, Alessandro. But Dan Ward on Bogles, a crowd favourite here this deck. It's good to see it getting it done at the top tables of Modern once again. What are we working here with on the other side of the table?
Alessandro is on Traverse Shadow, kind of one of the most winning decks of Pro Tour rivals of Ixalan. But here, Dan has Leyline of Sanctity. So Alessandro's best out of Liliana of the Veil shut down. So this innocent little 1/1 is going to potentially run away with the game.
Not so innocent, Eduardo. It's got a dark and mysterious past. It's got a lot of sins to wash off its hands, I think, his little slippery little hands.
Right. So, yeah, that's fair. I haven't considered it sins of the past.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of red ink on that particular ledger, I think. The slipperiest of Bogles has done a lot of very dark work in the past. But right now, it is all suited up and ready to go, suited and booted, and getting stuck in with Pogorzhelsky down to 11. And that leyline, we've talked about this technology from Bogle's decks in the main.
Yeah, and you can see that Thoughtseize and Inquisition in the hand. Alessandro forced the Thoughtseize himself to discard that Temur Battle Rage to get Delirium to traverse for a threat. This threat better be good. But I don't think there's much that can contend. Let me see how big this thing is. 3, 5, 6, 7. So Alessandro down to 9.
So the Death Shadow here, just a little 4/4.
Yes. However, here essentially Alessandro has
a little 4/4. Can we just step back and just look at the fact that we are describing a 4/4 for 1 mana as little in Modern?
It's tiny. It's not a problem. 5/5 is the standard.
Oh, okay.
Gold standard for
Gold
a 1
standard
mana
for a 1 mana creature is now 5/5. I understand.
Well, the cattle was banned, right?
Yeah,
It's just
too good. 3/3 for 1 mana. Get it out of here.
And that...
But that is that. Enough is enough here for Pogorzhelsky, and Dan Ward with Bogles manages to get the job done once again. We're going to see this guy in the quarterfinals, in the semi-finals as well here at GP Toronto. A very convincing performance from this Bogles player. I know that many of you around the world, many loyal fans of Maria Bartholdi, coverage colleague of ours, will be very, very happy to see the Hexproof Menace getting across the line. We're back now to our final table here. Luke Purcell and Chris Dockrill. These guys are going to get underway. Dockrill, one of the two Burn players here. Another one in John Stern has won, Eduardo, 2-0. So Burn are doing an absolute number on this tournament. Luke Purcell, on the other hand, playing Jeskai. Let's have a look at how things are going to pan out for him here. It is the straight-up control list featuring Gideon, ally of Zendikar. 4 copies of Cryptic Command alongside 4 copies of Snapcaster Mage. If nothing else, Luke Purcell is a man of great taste and refinement.
A man of great taste, but facing down a blast from the past or the future.
The only thing he's going to be tasting here is that the cold steel of Dockrill's burn spells by the look of things.
Right. And this matchup, as it usually comes down to, is how many copies of Lightning Helix can you draw and cast?
Yeah.
Along with your supporting casts, triple Dispel. Essentially, the more copies that Luke draws of the cards Dispel and Lightning Helix, the stronger his chances are. He really needs to get that Goblin Guide, though, off the table. Any source of repeatable damage from burn is just not an acceptable... It's just not acceptable. You cannot win a game where Goblin Guide hits you twice. It's really hard. So it's important that Luke gets rid of that Goblin Guide ASAP. And it seems like Luke has access to a Lightning Helix. Probably going to, if he has a basic that allows him to do this, or a Fetchland Raver, having to take that 2 life. That Goblin Guide attacked twice.
Yep.
Essentially having to Lightning Helix it by taking 2, it's like the Goblin Guide attacked twice, but you're priced in.
Got to do it. And Lightning Helix is, of course, one of the most impactful cards that you can play in a game like this against Burn, because not only does it remove a threat like Goblin Guide, it also gains you 3 life, negating, in effect, one of these other cards that the Burn player is looking to leverage. But right now, Purcell is well and truly under the gun. You've got to think that Dockrill's got follow-up plays for days, and indeed he does. Look at this. A Rest in Peace is going to close off avenues like Snapcaster Mage, and critically snagging that Lightning Helix. It means that there won't be any flashing back of that particular card.
This is actually an interesting argument for sideboarding here. I'm not sure. The Rest in Peace is a little awkward because it's not a burn spell. And you do need a critical mass of cards to win. So it's really awkward to board in 1, if even 2 Rest in Pieces. I think 1 is okay, but there aren't burn spells. And I really, really dislike keeping Grim Lavamancer if you're going to board in Rest in Peace, especially against a control deck.
Yeah, it is actually just a 1/1 for 1 here. It is just not even a Goblin Piker. It's a Goblin without its pike.
It's a Raging Goblin that forgot to rage.
Yeah, it's a calm Goblin.
Yes.
Exactly. It's a chill. It's a Goblin that is just chilling.
Exactly. And here, I can't help but feel, although the Rest in Peace is pulling work here.
Purcell on the mono Snapcaster draw. Rough stuff from him on 9 life, however. He's looking a little bit in better shape here, especially critically a copy of Dispel in hand. That card just says gain 3 life.
Essentially. The more copies you play of Healing Salve, the better you're off.
That's actually all you want. If you're facing against Burn and you just had like Healing Salves and other ways to gain life, you'd be as happy as Larry there. And Purcell certainly happy to have that Dispel in hand.
The sweetest sideboard deck you could have.
Yeah.
You want your whole deck to be Healing Salves?
Yeah.
Peace of mind.
I know what that is, but I'm sure it's excellent.
1 and a white, I believe.
Yeah.
White mana, discard, gain free. Discard a card, gain free life.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Perfect.
Easy. Perfect.
Easy.
Yeah, we figured it out. We broke the format here. Luke Purcell and Chris Dockrill still going at it here. Purcell on a reasonably comfortable 9 life, going down to 8, and it looks like we're just off to the races here, saddling up and heading down the turf as Snapcaster Mages get in with the hidden mode. They're 2/1s. They can actually attack and block.
I actually love Luke's take here. He understands that with like the double Dispel and also the 2 copies of Negate, that he's pretty comfortable against the Burn Spell plan. So as long as he can deal incidental damage and deal with Chris's creatures, he should be able to easily ride to victory, especially since Chris doesn't have more than 2 lands. So it's very easy for Luke to go Dispel or Negate on 1 card and then just keep up the pressure.
Logic not for 2 here is going to mean this Goblin Guide never gets to guide anyone anywhere except straight to the graveyard. And we'll see if Dockrill has a follow-up play. I think he's going to try to bolt Purcell. That's not going to work out well for him. No, it's a Lava Spike instead. That's better stuff.
Yes. The fact that it's a sorcery makes it better than Lightning Bolt.
Right here and right now, indeed it does. You're absolutely right. Down to 5, Luke Purcell. Can he find a way to push through these final points of damage? Vendilion Click is a nice way to put on some extra pressure here. And he does have at least 1 copy of Dispel in hand. Modern's Goblin Raider trading off against the Goblin Piker. The 2-1 and the 1-1 with no abilities.
Yeah. I believe here Luke actually has access to copies of Negate and Dispel. And I don't mean a copy each, copies. So Luke is probably pretty favored to win the game because of all this cheap counter magic that can stop the burn player from getting there and just deal enough pressure before it's too late.
Purcell down to 2 after another lightning spike, Lava Spike resolves here.
This is actually a shocking decision from my side because if...
Did you see the way you pointed his opponent? Lightning Bolt, you, my friend. Another Lightning Bolt also pointed at Purcell. He does have the second Dispel, however. Which spell? Dispel. Yes. And that has gotten rid of both of those Lightning Bolts here. Purcell down to 1, unafraid.
There's not much of a difference between 2 and 1. It's really sad to say.
1. There's a difference of 1. It's double the number.
Right.
But in this situation, you're absolutely right. Yes, of course, the burn deck dealing damage in multiples of 3, essentially. Sometimes 2 as well. But no, you're absolutely right in saying that. So the difference between 2 and 1, not so huge here for Purcell.
Yeah, but the reason I didn't like Luke allowing this Lava Spike to resolve is if Chris went Eidolon of the Great Revel, Luke lost the game on the spot. So I really disliked his decision to not negate the Lava Spike.
So Destructive Revelry in hand for Dockrill, and Purcell's happy to leave it there. Let's see what he can find here. Is he going to have a Lightning Bolt in his hand? He is, and Jeskai Control finds its way into the top 4 here of GP Toronto. The winner's handshake coming from Luke Purcell there as Dockrill just has to read him and weep. And we saw this Jeskai Control list, Eduardo, take a much more aggressive stance and transitioning to a much more tempo-based strategy once he realized that Rest in Peace was going to muck up any chance he had at a value game.
Right. And I really love this decision to ambush Viper mode.
Yeah.
Let's get in there.
He got in so early with those 2-1s, and it paid dividends. Purcell on 1, saw the winning line. Very easy with the Vendilion click. But critically, of course, that double Dispel, Witch Spell, Dispel, that is the end of that for the Lightning Bolt deck. Well done, Chris Dockrill, all the way to the top 8, but it is Purcell who we will be seeing in the top 4. Your hosts, TBS, JVL, they're getting ready. You better strap yourselves in as well. Hold on to your butts, my friend, because it is all excitement here from now. We're going to go to a break. We'll be back on the other side of this with the semi-finals here at GP Toronto.